welcome to Battle and Portage. Updates from the road. New little feature we're throwing out there just to keep y'all in the loop on all the crazy stuff we end up doing that you never hear about. It's been a busy 3 days of travels. Lots of people we talked to, interacted with, hung out with. Here to tell us a little bit about how that all got kicked off. It's your very own Joe Fredericks.
You know, the updates from the road are largely what goes into producing the content that we share on the website, battleandportage.com, and as we're putting some of the stories together for the podcast, too. It's like we have to travel around and meet these people and connect with these people, so that's what this installment, this series, Updates from the Road, is all about. Your brilliant idea, I might point out.
Well, thank you. Just seemed like we spent enough time talking about it that we might as well hit record.
Yeah, so the first part of this journey that you're talking about, this stretch of a few days, first takes us down to Wisconsin, actually. I connected with Bear Paulson here in Minnesota. Bear Paulson, of course, one of the new owners of Paddle and Portage, along with Ampostus. And Bear and I cruised over to the Bending Branches headquarters, right on the border of Wisconsin, Minnesota, along the St. Croix and that valley area there. And I was not exactly sure what was going to happen when we got there. One of the owners was going to be there, some people from like their marketing team, and Bear was like, yeah, let's go check it out. It's a cool place. I mean, you and I both have a Bending Branches paddle. Aaron and John at Lost Lakes have Bending Branches. The K-Man, like all the people that we know, Great Josh Dix, they have a Bending Branches paddle. It's kind of like the Band-Aid of paddles, you know, like the term Band-Aid, like that's an actual brand, but everyone just associates it as like that's the only thing. Like that's kind of how I think of canoe paddles, is Bending Branches.
Well, it helps that they're made right in our region. It's stocking all the shelves of the outdoor companies. Outfitters carry them. They're kind of a staple around here in our upper Midwest scene.
Totally. And so with that in mind, I kind of thought it was going to be like this huge sort of corporation vibe going into there. Like there's so many of those paddles around. It's so robust that it might not be a very sort of human experience. Wasn't like that at all. They got a staff of 25 people, and there's people that are holding the paddles, you know. I mean, there's some machines that do a little bit of like the carving and stuff, but it's human beings making these paddles. And we got to take this tour. It was so cool. It smells like a hardware store,
like kind of like a lumberyard.
Yeah, like the lumberyard kind of vibe, but there's also all this cool equipment and sanders, and it was just really inspiring. We got some great photos that we'll put on social media and so forth, and to go with the episode here. But a huge shout out to Brian and Kate and the team at Bending Branches for giving Bear and I that tour. It was a really eye-opening and cool experience. And by the way, we were invited to go back to make an actual full episode when everything's up and running in there, and take a tour, take our listeners, you listening, on a tour inside there too.
Sign me up. Sounds like an amazing behind-the-scenes experience. And that just kicking off this stretch of travels.
It was. So from there, Bear and I parted ways, and then you and I plan to meet on Saturday, the 16th, in Duluth at Fitker's. There was a book event happening that night for Last Entry Point. But before that, I connected with this really kind soul named Tom. Tom lives in Duluth. Tom is a huge Boundary Waters paddler. Like goes in much more than you and I do combined, probably. I mean, he lives to kind of get in there. It's like his place. Builds his own canoes, cedar strip canoes. Fascinating fellow. Well, Tom, in November this month, found a pack laying on the shore of Bald Eagle Lake in the Boundary Waters. He's going along.
Like a portage pack or like a day pack?
A Cook Custom Sewing green big pack. You know, like it had a couple tents in it. It had some camping gear, a cook stove, pillows, toiletry items, like a full-on pack laying there on the shore.
Like floating in the water, washed up, tangled in the branches?
Yeah, it was washed up. It was like 20 feet, actually, kind of like because the water probably had receded, is what Tom thought. So it was a little ways up on the shore. So he got out of his canoe, went up to it, kind of rummaging around, looking around, and
Wait, did you just give the whole spoiler away?
Nah, because there's more. The best part is coming up.
Oh, okay. Well, let's hear it.
You're paddling along
On Bald Eagle. Yep.
On November 1st.
Yep.
And what do you see?
So as I was paddling, I could see something up ahead on the shore that didn't look natural. I couldn't tell what it was at the time. So as I paddled up to it, I could tell it was a pack. And as soon as I saw that pack, I knew exactly whose it was. I knew it was the people that dumped. Why else would you find a pack on Bald Eagle? So I went up to it, and it was about 20 feet up on the rocks. It was not like bobbing in the water. And it was open. And some of the contents were taken out. There was a couple of items that were around it. So I know someone else had found it, but for whatever reason, they didn't do anything with it, and they didn't really rifle through it because everything in this pack was still kind of packed away, and it was pretty full. It was probably 60 pounds. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to save this pack, and so I dumped everything out, and everything was pretty wet.
And then in that is some prescription
medication or something? Yeah, so the first thing I did was try to figure out what I could carry back myself, because I'm on my own. So I'm like, some of this stuff I'm just not going to take with me. Some soggy pillows, a ratty rain suit, and some other, consumables that just were not of any value or not worth saving. So there were 2 tents there, nice ones. Nice. It was a Cook custom sewing pack. So I'm like, man, someone's going to really like this pack. And a stove and some flashlights, things that regular camping gear. So I grabbed everything I could, and I left some items in a plastic bag on the shore that I couldn't take back. And inside of this gear kit was a toiletry bag, and there was some prescription pills in there, and the labels were mostly peeled off or wet, and I couldn't read anything, but there was one bottle that I got a partial name and an RX number, and then it came from a Costco in St. Louis Park. So I'm like, well, this has got to be enough to at least try to figure out who this guy is, So I went to my camp, I spent a weekend there, and I took all his gear out and I dried it out because it was getting kind of smelly, and I thought, you got to get this stuff dry. And so I dried everything out.
The tents and stuff?
Oh yeah. Set them up, dried them out. And also so I could get the weight down so I could carry it back, because the Snake River entry point is a mile long. And so besides having to huff my own gear back, now I had another pack. So wasn't too excited about that.
That's the Snake River entry point? That's that one where you park and it starts with that long haul?
Yeah. It's an easy portage, but it's long.
Yeah, it used to be a road or a train
old railroad
or
trade, yeah. There was a logging camp up at the top of it. So anyway, I get back, and I called the pharmacy, and I tried to be brief because I knew they probably wouldn't want to talk to me. And I explained what I had, and the lady immediately told me, she goes, we're not going to give you our patient's information to you. I said, I know you're not going to. I'm not asking you to do that. But would you call this guy and tell him I have his gear and ask him about dumping in Bald Eagle Lake? And she's like, oh, so there was an accident? Yes. I said, yes, I have his gear, and I'd like to talk to him and get his gear back. So then she hung up, and about an hour later, I got the text from the guy, and he was just like flipping out. He was so excited, he couldn't believe that I had his gear. So we started this long text string back and forth talking about what had happened, and I said I thought he had dumped in September, but he said no, he dumped in June, and told me that story. He said this gear's been out there all summer. So from June to November, that gear was sitting out there on the rocks. The pack looked great, and I'm surprised the contents weren't in worse shape because the pack was open. So we did our exchanges back and forth, and he was going to come up here and get it. And I said, hey, just, coincidentally, my wife is going to be down right close to you guys this weekend. So we just decided that it would just be easier that way. So he really wanted to repay me with something. He kept asking, what can I do, or what can I buy you, or what do you need? I said, I don't need anything. Just pay it forward, and what comes around goes around. So we ended up settling on a 12-pack of beer because I know that people need to express gratitude, and sometimes you have to accept something in return so that they feel like they did something.
Yeah,
so
totally.
It was a 12-pack of beer.
Great. What kind of beer?
I don't know. My wife's down there. I don't know
whatever you got you.
Yeah. Well, I said something good. I figured I might as well at least get something good.
Yeah.
Some craft Minneapolis beer.
Yeah. Cool.
So I don't know. I feel good about it, and I'm glad he got his gear back. And he is really happy. He was really excited to tell his son who he was with, and the tent was his neighbor's, and he thought that was all gone. So yeah.
And that gear wasn't all mildewy, rotted out.
It really wasn't. I mean, the tent actually turned out really nice. Once I dried it out, the smell went away, and everything was really salvageable except for the pillows and, like I said, some toilet paper and things like that. Yeah, no, it was all there. I mean, there's still a bag up there with a griddle and some other knickknacks that I just couldn't carry. So it's in a bag up on shore. And I know his wife said she wants the griddle back. So I said, well, they're gonna have to go back and get it on their own.
So that's Tom's version. Tom lives in Duluth. Like I said, I met him at Fitger's. We've got this write-up on the website, paddleandportage.com. It's getting a lot of attention on social media as well. And what a great story at a time where it's just nice to hear, like, good people doing good things in the Boundary Waters, helping other people out. He could have been like, I'm not lugging this thing out a mile out the Snake River entry point. I'm not setting up this tent. Like, it's just a cool story. Tom's a really nice guy, and we're probably going to be hearing from him again on an upcoming episode about ice. So stay tuned for that. More to come from Tom.
I'm looking forward to that ice episode for sure. It's a good point to remind all y'all listening that so many of our stories come from you, from your messages and your emails. That's what it's all about. So thanks, Tom. And if you got a little story rolling around in your head that you've thought about sharing or it just occurred to you, maybe you could share. Send it our way, joe@paddleandportage.com.
Hi, I'm Laura Mullen, co-founder of Bent Paddle Brewing Company in Duluth, Minnesota. Here at Bent Paddle, we make quality craft beer and hemp cannabis beverages from the clean water of Lake Superior. On your way up to the BWCA, be sure to check out our Lincoln Park Craft District tap room to get a stainless steel or growler to go, or find Bent Paddle at restaurants, bars, and liquor stores throughout Minnesota. Let Bent Paddle be the bridge that lets good memories and conversation flow while you're reflecting on the perfect campsite or the splendidness of the Northern Lights. For more info, visit bentpaddlebrewing.com or check us out on Facebook or Instagram. Cheers!
This is Mark Savoy with Solbakken on Superior. Solbakken has 6 motel rooms and 6 charming cabins located on the shores of Lake Superior. The motel rooms are the perfect place to stop over either on your way in or your way out of the Boundary Waters canoe area. Visit our website at Solbakken on Superior to make your reservations today.
Now, you wrapped up this conversation with Tom down in Duluth, and I come rolling in.
2 minutes later, or 5.
Yeah, I'd been sort of cranking away trying to get my sauna finished because it was a nice day, and then flew south on 61 to get to Fitger's for this, what was billed as an author reading book event for the last entry point. You've done many of those throughout the spring, summer, fall to coincide with the release of the book. Mm-hmm. But this was anything but that. Maybe to the utter surprise of the Fitger's bookstore staff. But it really, let's like unfold it. Let's take it from the top. It was a really beautiful, surreal experience.
It was an absolutely captivating, heartwarming, emotional, sad, powerful, all these emotions experienced in an hour's time. And we had some guests basically that came to the book event, and I told the Fitger's people, who were really cool about it, like, this isn't going to be a reading, this isn't going to be a signing, we're just going to have some conversations with some people who've been impacted by this topic of death and dangerous situations in the Boundary Waters. And some of the people that we're talking about who were present at that are members of Mark Ham's family. Mark passed away in May on Lake Agnes inside the Boundary Waters. And this was happening like right before the Curtain Falls situation and all this publicity and attention about people dying in the Boundary Waters this year. And I was able earlier in the year, in May, to go meet with this family and talk to them about what happened to Mark and their version to get things straight and their story about who he was and why he loved the Boundary Waters and that he was wearing his life jacket, or the circumstances as to why maybe the life jacket wasn't like right on him when he was found. So that's a whole separate story that we had published earlier in the year. And they came to this event on Saturday at Fitkers to talk about how they've been doing since then, since Curtain Falls and all the attention, and how they're as a family doing, and are they going back to the Boundary Waters? And so they were present, and also there was Rick Slatton, who we've heard from on the podcast many times and on the articles for Paddle and Portage and so forth. And he's the captain of the St. Louis County Rescue Squad. So Rick was also there with this family, and they'd never met before.
And just to help transport you there, this event is kind of tucked away in the Fitkers building, kind of in a fancy sort of back room area. And so, folks kind of meandered into this space, and there's this large table. They have all these chairs around it, and it just feels really formal. Mm-hmm. And, it's about starting time. We had both greeted the family already, and Rick was there, and some other folks that came in, and, we totally pivoted. We grabbed everybody, we pulled chairs from the table and made a circled up for a real conversation, and kicked off what really became, in sort of some ways, a kind of grief and loss related to the Boundary Waters discussion, almost therapeutic session for this family and for Rick even.
Right. And here are some parts of the discussion that took place. You'll hear Rick Slatton's voice. You'll hear Mark's daughter Molly's voice, Mark's son Will's voice, and Mark's widow now, Kathy's voice, as well as mine. And just some excerpts from what was, as you said, an author event, air quotes, that became this discussion. So here's just some excerpts from that.
Camping, that was our life. And so to step back into that now is really a challenge, because that's something we did always together. And so it's a struggle now to consider joy with that.
And you also told me that you felt kind of angry at the Boundary Waters earlier.
Well, I'm done with that. Because honestly, as you said, there's more to the story. And so thankful you wrote the article, because that gave us more peace. No, I'm not angry at the Boundary Waters. It's just like he was there in a situation with no one there to help him. And no one could have helped him, is what we realized as this happened, because there was no medical way to help him.
That he may have, if he was at home, the same
thing.
And that's kind of what they said, too, is
there's nothing we could have done.
Can I ask why, now that some time has passed since I was in your home, you guys invited me into your home, which was a big deal for me, certainly that day, and I'm sure for you, why you agreed to have me come and write the story and gave me permission to meet you?
We were so upset with people saying, and friends even, like, oh, Mark wasn't wearing his life jacket, Mark this and that, and it doesn't sound like Mark. And it's just like, no, because before you came, we were kind of uncovering the pieces, and Will and I, even as we we're driving back home with all his gear, we called up the father, son, and asked him, could you tell us more when you found Mark? What did you see? What could you describe this stuff? And as they revealed more of how they found him, it's like so different than what's reported. But yet, here it is out there with many news places telling, oh, a Duluth man dies, didn't wear his life jacket, it was found way far away from him, or on. And now that was so upsetting. And so, yeah, and also
just the person, for people to actually know who this person was.
And it just, when you were there just talking about it and just going back to remembering all the camping experiences we've had with Mark, and it reminds you, as you talk about being prepared, Mark was always one who would, he wouldn't jump into a dangerous situation. If it was windy, we're camping that day. we don't need to leave. You know, we're windbound. If it means we have to take a different route, and Will was with us one time, so we had to take a different route, which was upsetting to me because it was a longer paddle. But we did, because that's the safer way to go. You know, he did all those things, so it was to be able to go back and go, okay, wait a minute, this is what Mark was doing. So all that was very helpful.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah.
Getting the opportunity, especially since you reached out specifically about telling the story of the person behind the story, I think, at least from my perspective, that's what it seemed like was a big draw. Especially since there was so much guessing and assumed information being spread.
With nobody asking his family.
Yeah. And from the way it was described, it was very
like he was
different.
careless and
Yeah.
And learn this lesson, you know, learn from him, wear your life jacket.
Way to populate your database is not to read the paper and watch the news, because there's a lot of Boundary Waters calls we get that the public never learns about. You know, if Grandma Kabundi falls and breaks her wrist and we go in and get her, there might not even be a press release on it. People want, you know, and they have this Walt Disney Mr. Bluebird on my shoulder that I'm going to go in the Boundary Waters and find harmony with the universe. And the BWC will kill you just as much as give you peace. And we had a lot of calls in 2020.
Yeah.
I'll bet if you wanted a discount camping gear, just look at Facebook Marketplace in 2021, because a lot of those fibbies decided, I don't know, this ain't for me.
Your own personal safety is a huge component of a canoe trip. I mean, obviously, like even like Rick's saying, like the point of the trip, you got to get home. But when you take unnecessary risks, like people have done this fall and September, paddling on waves, very inexperienced paddlers on Alton Lake up by Sawbill, and having to dispatch. Crews are going in, search and rescue volunteers. These are people in Grand Marais that, you know, work at the restaurants and, you know, have families and so forth. And now they're going out in those conditions. Planes are being called in from all over the region, and it's not just like your own experience that's going to be impacted by this. It's Rick and the crew and these people that we know from town and Grand Marais and our community members and so forth. And you know, it's been interesting to see some of the pushback. Some of the big resort owners up the Gunflint recently walked up and he popped out and said, you know, I'm not carrying your book on our shelves here, and why don't you find something a little more cheery to write about?
oh my goodness.
And I said, well, you know, like, I mean, the whole point of the book is so that your guests get to, I said, I mean, these things happen out there, I said. And he goes, yeah, I know, it happens all the time. And I said, well, that's the whole point, is that like people will read it and be educated about these things that happen, the reality, and then they'll be able to come back and tell their families and book more guests for you. And if you have a moment, or maybe, you know, we can all, everybody here can take a moment at Thanksgiving this year and think about Mark and Natalie in Ohio, and then Lisa Skelton in St. Paul, and her dad's still out there somewhere, and all the other people in the book, the people from Curtin Falls now, and that'll be their first Thanksgiving, and that, you know, you're not alone in that feeling, and we'll be thinking of you guys too, and so that we'll be in thought about that for sure.
You know, in the beginning, all these people flock, and then they sort of drop away, and your lives, everybody else's lives go back to normal, and you're left with, my life is never going to be the same again. Our lives aren't ever going to be the same again. But it's nice to hear when people are saying they're still thinking about us. That definitely means a lot.
There was a lot of emotion in that room. Not too much. There was, you know, obviously deep, meaningful, soulful sharing. There's questions and pragmatic sort of discussion around the processes of search and rescue. And there was lots of laughter. You know, it was everything. And after it wrapped up, you and I talked to Molly and Will just to see how it all felt. Here's a little bit of that conversation.
I think for me, I wasn't sure what to expect. I came in with almost no expectations other than Molly told me that there was a book signing and we should all come. But it was nice to have a chat and kind of go over things. I haven't really thought about that specific time in May since, I don't know, June, since we kind of wrapped up Dad's memorial. So painful to come back to, but ultimately nice and kind of good to think about. What brought us back to the Boundary Waters, what we were kind of thinking and feeling with that, and kind of our connection with the whole area and with Dad again. So it was a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. It was a good experience. I wasn't 100% sure to know what to expect, but it was really nice talking with Rick too, and just getting some validation from him that was honestly huge for some closure for us, I think. So it was nice to talk to everybody and just kind of hear that everybody's still thinking about all these families and the association with the Boundary Waters.
Well, we're going to continue to think about you guys. Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, it means a lot.
Yeah.
What most people don't know about Joe Fredericks is that not only does he tell stories in written form, compiles and produces them for the podcast, but Joe is a bit of a real-life orchestrator of magical moments. And this was a real-life orchestration of something very special and very magical. And the more I know you, Joe, the more I see you wizarding around, making these kind of special things happen.
Well, it was really an honor to have everyone there and to talk about real life stuff. And there were some moments there that I don't think we need to get too deep into about Mark's passing, but things that Rick shared that meant a whole lot to the family about the circumstances, and that I think for me made the whole night worth it. And also another thing that really stood out to me and impacted me in a pretty deep way was I asked the family and said, you know, why did you invite me into your home back in May? I'd never met them. They'd never heard of me before up at that point. And I said, well, how come you agreed to let me come into your house and talk about your dad who just passed away days before? And Will said,
I think the big thing is no one had asked us what happened, and we know him best.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody ever asked the family how they're doing.
Or who their dad was.
Or who's Mark Ham. Like, that's what we're doing here, Patlin Portages. We have interest in this place, but not just like the trees and the woods and the water and the animals and stuff, but who are the people that come here and love this place? And sometimes who are the people that die here, even in there? And it just hit me as something like that was a big moment to hear that, and I can just see Will's face when he was saying it too. So yeah, it was a really powerful night and experience, and thanks to Rick and Molly, Kathy, Rachel, Will, and the Fitkers crew for allowing that to happen.
And of course all those other folks that showed up for this author event that just were along for the ride.
Well, there's this couple from Duluth that's just new to Duluth, and they walked into the event not real late, but maybe 10 minutes into it or something, and we were already just like in full on kind of like in the zone, almost like walking into church late or something, where you're kind of being quiet and you're not trying to disrupt the scene too much. And I don't think they really knew like what was going on. Like, you expect you're walking into an author event and maybe some man or woman up in front doing, reading an excerpt from the book and then talking about it. It was not that at all.
It was not that.
But they just rolled with it. They just kind of came in. So thanks to them and everyone for being so gracious and letting the family in particular, and Rick. I mean, that's kind of was the dynamic.
Yeah, it was a really great scene. And you, as, like church, after all the lingering and visiting and everything wrapped up, you were pretty excited to visit the steakhouse and get along with resting into your night. Mm-hmm. And I was excited to hop in my car and head over to my friend Emily Ford's house.
Emily, what's happening there with winter on the horizon and so forth?
Well, Emily's a busy person, still working hard as the head gardener at the Glensheen Mansion. Mm-hmm. But if you've been following Emily, you will know that last year her partner Anna Hennessy raced the Iditarod, and Emily was up there and completed the Iditarod, I should say. Mm-hmm. And Emily was up there training the dogs, raced her first big races up in Alaska. That was a major experience for the both of them. So Emily and I got just some real good time to hang out, catch up on life, stay up way too late talking about way too many things, life related. It's a big undertaking to do a race like this.
Sure.
Many racers don't even finish.
Yeah.
So I asked Emily just to kind of explain a little bit about what's coming up. Let's just jump into that conversation. Emily, would you mind sharing what's ahead for you?
Sure. Yeah. Heading out to Alaska to train for the Iditarod, which is crazy. If you don't know what the Iditarod is, it's a 1,000-mile dog sled race across the backlands of Alaska, which happens in March, so March 2025. We'll get started for that. And so far, Anna, my partner, is up there getting the dogs ready and has been training the dogs like crazy to get ready for the sled season. And then I will follow behind. Other than that, we've been raising funds for Iditarod, and it's just adventures. I always say that adventures are never free, but they're often worth it. And so I've been down here in the lower 48 collecting some change and asking people to support. So, yeah.
For anybody who's listening to this, what's the easiest way for people to find you and support your race coming up?
Yeah, you can always find me on Instagram. My handle is at @EmilyOnTrail, and you can find me on my website, emilyontrail.com. You can email me at emilyontrail@gmail.com. You can find me almost anywhere if you look up Emily on Trail. And yeah, you can join along and follow along and see what we're up to and what we're doing next.
Okay, two thoughts. One, I want to give a shout out to Skylar and Olivia, who are some pals from Grand Marais, who I dance Ula with. But can you share a little bit about what some of the roles are for those folks who are going to be supporting the race, and then also what that looks like building up to the Iditarod, because you're going to do several other races. And yeah, if you want to just talk about that.
Yeah, so Skylar and Olivia are up there already, even before I get there, and they help us train dogs and handle for us. So that looks like traveling with us to races, because we have maybe 4 to 6 races we'll do mid-distance, so about 300 miles apiece. So they'll drive with us, they'll take care of the dogs, they'll help feed the dogs. They scoop a lot of poop for us, which is awesome. They stay awake with us in the crazy hours of the night. And they've handled dogs for mushers before, and it's such a delight to have them there. Like, this season would not be possible with an extra couple sets of hands. So a huge shout out, a huge thank you to the both of them. And they're so good with sled dogs, it's remarkable.
And then moving from that to when is the first race that you're going to be starting, and what does that circuit look like in building up to the Iditarod? Yeah,
so we start racing at the end of December, pretty close to Christmas, and really it's a race almost every couple of weeks after that, and it's just training the dogs for getting their racing legs underneath them, building them up as athletes. So like we'll do the Knik 200, the Copper Basin. Anna will be running the Canadian Yukon 500. Maybe we'll be running the Goose Bay 150, the Two Rivers 200, and then Iditarod, which will be crazy. So yeah, we don't just, I always like to say it's not a couch to 5K situation. Like, it's definitely training for a long marathon for these dogs. So, and like when we start out, when Anna starts training the dogs, it's like, her first day is only 8 miles, and now they're doing 100 miles a day. So it's kind of crazy. And she started that in October, and now it's almost December.
Big shout out and sending lots of love to Anna for her huge labor. I know you'd be there too if you weren't wrapping up your commitments here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But me and anybody else who's listening, sending you off with a tremendous amount of love and support for moving into your first Iditarod. And if you have the means and the desire, some financial support as well to send your way.
Thank you.
I'm going to miss you.
We'll be back in the spring. Don't you worry.
Well, I hope so.
Stay tuned for 2025 Iditarod updates and see where that lands.
Heck yeah. And there's a lot going on in that scene. So we'll try to bring as much of that as we can. And that concludes one weekend of road time. And it's easy for us to sit down after a weekend like that and make sure to give you updates and countless things that we forget about in between these. But it means a lot that you come on the road with us when we do this, and that we can share it with you. We got another full podcast episode coming up. Mm-hmm. Stay tuned for that. You want to give any preview?
Well, it involves airplanes, fish nets, and deep travel into the wilderness.
Enough said.
As for the next day or two, we got to figure out how to get our gear buttoned up, driveways in order. There's some serious rain coming our way.
Yeah, 2.5 inches in less than 24 hours. I'm terrified. How you feeling?
I'm excited, and also probably going to be staring out the window like some kind of fanatic, and maybe even running around outside in a little bit of it myself too.
Well, the last time this happened in the spring, my culvert couldn't handle it, and I had to create an overflow for it. So maybe we'll just keep the canoes ready in case we paddle.
Run the culvert! Shoot the chutes, Albie!